Hi, I'm Greg Schaffer, and welcome to the Virtual CISO Moment. Today's guest is Becky MacDonald. She is the founder of Cyber Risk Navigator and a seasoned cybersecurity leader with decades of experience helping organizations turn confusion into clarity when it comes to cyber risk and compliance. Becky has led security programs across healthcare, higher ed, financial services, and more, guiding organizations from fragmented compliance-driven efforts into mature risk-based cybersecurity strategies. Through her work as a fractional CISO, she helps organizations strengthen their security posture, reduce risk, and navigate complex regulatory environments, all without the overhead of a full-time CISO. Becky, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Greg. Happy to be here.
Yes, and my assistant does such a great job of making these intros for me. Thank you, ChatGPT. Appreciate it.
I was going to say that sounded very much like what was on my LinkedIn profile.
That's where we get it from. So if there's anything wrong in the intro, it's because there's probably something wrong on the LinkedIn profile or I made an error. But
no, okay, you hit it on and you did really well.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's obviously just a very brief high-level overview of your past and your history and your experience. But why don't you take us back to the beginning, how and why you got started? I understand when we were talking beforehand that we both are fellow former CNEs, that most people probably don't know what that means for Novell. But why don't we go back to the beginning and bring us all the way to today?
It's funny because, working with younger folks today, I actually have had people like, serious, Becky, what is Novell? And so I had to go Google it and send them the link of the history of Novell, right? Because a lot of people don't know.
Or they say novel.
Yeah. Yep. So let's see. I started my career in networking and servers. Actually really loved that. I actually started college in programming, believe it or not. Within the first year, realized that really wasn't for me. I took a networking class, fell in love. Loved the idea of connecting and communicating and doing that kind of work much better than programming. So started off as a systems administrator. And I'd like to say that I've been doing security since day one, right? When you're a server and a network person, your whole focus is on securing access and permissions and things like that, right? The identity, making sure that, all of that is at the core foundation of all of that. So it was very natural for me to fall in love with security as well. Right.
Yeah. And I like to tell people, it's just like, I mean, we didn't have like red teaming, blue teaming, or plaid teaming or whatever back then. We called it troubleshooting. I mean, it was part of the job. I mean, none of this like color coded stuff. It really wasn't specialized. It's like it was all part of what we did. So, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your story, but I had to get that
perfect. Because it's very much, and so it was like the jack of all trades kind of thing too, right? Back in those days. I don't want to age myself too much here, but honestly, things evolved pretty quick. They weren't so specialized. And so you got a lot of opportunity. I also spent the majority of my career in nonprofit organizations and particularly healthcare, higher education, and K-12 education. And you wear a lot of hats in those kind of roles, right? And so I feel like those are the roles that really shaped who I became and what kind of opportunities were given to me and how I grew my skills. You became a jack of all trades. And you weren't so specialized and siloed as you are today or in the larger organization. So really loved that. At some point throughout my career, I started getting into leadership. I had the opportunity to lead a help desk server network team. And that grew into also supporting DBAs, business intelligence, all of that. Basically, if it wasn't the main application, I was supporting it. And when I took that supervisor position, it was also right in the early days of HIPAA. And they're like, oh, other duties assigned. We need HIPAA policies. We need to make sure that our technical controls are aligned with HIPAA. And so I took that on. And from there, the passion grew, right? I really wanted to get more on the risk management side of it and a little bit less on the tactical side. So working through that, I've always stayed somewhat tactical, but also very strategic and risk focused. And I really like the risk side of it, right? You can look at frameworks and you can say, you got to do this, this, and this, and this. Really, it comes down to risk. You've got to have that risk conversation and what is right sized. So after that, I did that for many years. And then I took a CISO role. My first CISO role was with a pretty good sized health system. and did CISO work for 10 years, both in higher education and healthcare. Really got to see the forefront of a lot of really great things, a lot of growth in the security realm of things, right? So when I first started in security, there weren't a lot of real life examples of these breaches actually happening, right? Well, then you could go back to Anthem, first one in healthcare that was huge, right? From then on, my job got so much easier, right? Because it became real. And I wouldn't say it was easy, but it became real for leaders, for those in healthcare. It all became very real. You take a look at Target too around that same time. And that really started to shape where I think security was going and security leadership was going across organizations. And we've seen a lot of growth over the last 10 years, right? I think that might have been 15 years ago, right? Anthem.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's been a minute, that's for sure.
And for sure. Yeah. So CISO roles. And then, I've always wanted to I worked for some large corporations, and those afforded me opportunities that you don't get in the smaller nonprofit organizations, right? Very mature GRC programs, medical device segmentation, unlimited tools, right? Really good, sexy tools, what I call, right? That your smaller organizations can't afford. But my heart's always been in that smaller, mid-sized market. And being in healthcare or nonprofit for as long as I was, it's kind of like, I feel like my superpower is finding a way to make things happen with limited budget, getting creative, right? And I feel like that's where I have the most passion is making progress despite not having a huge budget.
Well, that's like classic risk management mindset, right? It's like, and I know you mentioned that. I pinged on that because when I was going for my CISSP, I thought that like networking was going to be my strongest domain there, because I'd been doing it for so long, and actually risk management which was like, okay. And that's when I realized, no, I think I want to be a risk manager or go more towards that space. But that's exactly what it is, because the difference between looking at a list, I think you alluded to like frameworks and checking off things, as opposed to really understanding the risk of the environment, is really the big difference from a business perspective, right?
Correct. A lot of folks go into this thinking you've got to implement check. Does that make sense for this organization? Is it the right approach for them? Could we do something a little bit different or lighter based on budget or their risk profile, right? And so that's kind of my superpower, is kind of figuring out that niche and what was going to work right, because there is no one way to do things, right?
Well, right. And that brings me, I want to talk just for a moment about the virtual CISO world. It's certainly evolved over the last 10 or 15 years. And I think that sometimes it gets a little bit muddied as to what really makes a good, effective virtual CISO. We've kind of danced around some of the things with risk management, but from your perspective, how would you answer that? What really are the qualities that a virtual CISO needs?
Yeah, and I think it's a breadth of things. And I would say some technical acumen, even though many would argue that that's not true. I feel like I can be in a room with engineers and systems folks, and I can see through the BS because of my technical background. Okay, you're telling me that this is, going to cost X number of dollars and it's going to take a year to implement. I think there's another approach to that, and it could look something more like this, right? So it kind of cuts to the chase on some of those more tactical aspects of the role, and it helps right size and shape our roadmap, right? But I really think it's about that risk and the willingness to understand the business and their profile and where their real threats are, right? I'm not going to push them to implement something that it really shouldn't be in scope for them, right? Because maybe it's just not in their wheelhouse or a threat that is preeminent for them right now, right? So really trying to understand that business and then looking at things from a risk perspective. And the one thing that I see too is folks try to do everything all at once. To me, security is a journey, right? It takes multiple years to get to a maturity level. I can look at that and say, okay, in this particular domain, in this area, we're going to start with this. And next year, our roadmap is we're going to grow that and maybe mature that next layer up of maturity in that particular domain, right? There's some things that you want to do right off the bat. Identity. There's a lot of things in the identity domain that everybody should be doing, regardless of size and types of applications, right? A lot of organizations today, particularly smaller, mid-sized companies, are cloud first. They don't have the network infrastructure. They don't have a lot of those things. What they have is a dozen different SaaS applications, and their identity could be their weakest link there across all that ecosystem, right? So, but really looking at the business, what kind of regulatory requirements also have to play into that, right? Because some things you just have to do, whether it's in the risk profile or not, right? How you do it could be different though. So you really need to understand the business, you need to understand risk, and you need to understand the technical capabilities in my mind.
Well, and I think that bringing it home right there answers where I was about to go next, because when I've talked about the virtual CISO field evolving, and in some cases maybe de-evolving, is in that you've got some instances where folks that have very limited experience in the field, like their IT security managers, they slap the vCISO moniker on their name. And I was going to ask this question, but I think you answered it, because I implore folks that when they're looking for virtual CISOs, see what their approach is exactly. And if they go down the check the box, maybe not so much. If they go down the risk management and looking at things holistically and asking first about what the business is like, that they're the ones that are going to be the more successful. But how does one communicate that to an organization that's looking for a virtual CISO that doesn't really know the difference between them, because they both say vCISO?
Right. And honestly, let's be honest, in the space that we're talking about here, small and mid-size, most of these folks are looking for most cost effective. Right. And so, and they're looking to check the box, or they've had an incident, right? I feel like those that have had an incident are really looking for strong, right? And they can dig through that. I think what you want to do is look at their background, right? So I've seen it too. I've seen it on people's LinkedIn profiles. You went from being maybe a sales rep selling cybersecurity to all of a sudden now you've started your own vCISO program and you're a vCISO. Maybe that's not the right approach depending on your situation, right? It could absolutely be the right approach if you're just looking to have somebody guide you from a leadership standpoint, and you feel like you're strong in the technical aspects and you've got strong leadership there and capabilities. Maybe that kind of CISO works for you. I think ideally you'd want to look for somebody that is well-rounded and has done a lot of those things, because they bring more to the table.
Yeah, and I've popularized, but I've put forth the idea that over the last year or two, that I think we're starting to see a widening of a split in the vCISO world between those different types. And I don't know how that's eventually going to shake out. At one point in time, I was thinking, well, maybe it would be better if the industry had different monikers for each side, maybe call one fractional and one virtual information security officer. I don't know. It's just that I know
that's tough, because I think a lot of folks still haven't really even caught on to what a vCISO is. A lot of the clients I work with, they're not searching for or looking for a CISO. They're looking for cybersecurity expertise. That's about as much as they know all the times, right?
Yeah, and a virtual CISO goes so much beyond the cyber aspect into the governance, the risk management, and all of that. So
you got to have all those parts, right? And it's not, here's one of my biggest things on the governance and policy side. People just slapping policy templates out there, and then that's not how the business runs, and nobody's adhering to them. You're in violation of your policies from day one. That drives me nuts. I'd rather you have a policy that is something that you can enact and operationalize than to just have a paper policy. Right.
Well, and that brings me to another question about the engagements. You already mentioned one mistake that sometimes people make. They either use templates, or they nowadays will use some sort of like ChatGPT or Copilot or something to create a policy. And if it doesn't really reflect your environment, then that could be a real issue, particularly if you're ever going to be audited, because that's what audits do. But what are some of the common mistakes that you see when you first engage with the clients as a virtual CISO? Mistakes that the organizations have made and are making, and maybe even so much as expectations as well?
Yeah. So obviously the policy one is they have a lot of policies. They haven't been updated in years. They can't even cite to me what their policies say. Their employees don't know, right? I do a risk assessment and I'm asking folks, do you have a disaster recovery plan? Surprisingly, you'll find the server folks and the network folks don't even know that the plan exists. They
Wow.
are critical to that
Mhm.
plan. So the plan needs to be dusted off.
I mean, you and I, when we were doing the networking stuff back in the day and the server admins, we would have one because we wanted to keep our jobs.
Yeah,
It's like-
absolutely. And it was kind of tasked to us, right? I mean, in our days, we wore all of those hats, right? We were expected to be the DR person too, and all of that. So I think that's a problem or a challenge. The other thing I see is tool sprawl.
Yes.
Just way too many tools with a niche and a little piece here, and honestly, not fully utilized each tool, right? I think we've all seen that a lot, right? You buy this tool, you stand it up, you do the bare bones. You probably have good intentions of growing and putting in those next pieces of maturity with it, enabling those next features. Either you get pushback from leadership of you can't enable those features because it might impact things, or you just get busy onto the next project. The next hot project. The next hot project is generally the biggest challenge. And in higher education, we tended to see a lot more of that pushback from faculty and things like that. But often it's just the continuous cycle of the hot project and the next initiative. You never fully implement everything. So stepping back and looking at the ecosystem and saying, okay, this tool does this tool does this, and this tool does this. Okay?
I think that this is a common issue for a long time, because I remember one of my earlier networking jobs. This was like my first really supervisory type position. We had a nice SNMP based network management platform that had been purchased and installed by the vendor a year and a half earlier, but there was really nobody taking advantage of it. And the problem for it was not because of lack of knowledge or lack of will; it was lack of time, lack of resources. And I tell you, it's like, you fast forward now. That's been probably a good. I'm going to do the math. That's 28 years, and the problem still exists. So how can we do better in the security industry, particularly since we're talking about SMBs and trying to be as efficient as possible? How can we be better with getting them to if they purchase tools, to manage the tools properly, or to make maybe other decisions?
Right. So I think, first of all, to me, we got to stop the problem of not disclosing, making visible to the leaders the effort that really goes into fully deploying something, right? So a lot of times the security stuff and the IT stuff is back office, right? And it's not visible to the leaders. And so it becomes a thing of what's visible to them is what we work on, and we forget about everything else because this is what's important to the leaders. So describing and putting on our roadmaps and our plans these tools and the full deployment of them and why they're important and why they feed things, right? It's going to help us with availability. I'm going to know quicker that something's down in your SNMP example, right? We have to carve out the time to do those things. If we don't carve those out, you're building capabilities, business capabilities on top of a weak structure, right? So having that conversation, and it's not the easiest conversation to have because a lot of this just goes over their head. They also don't understand why it takes so long to do, right? Or why we need so many resources to do it. I think the conversation about tool sprawl and having too many different things is easier when you're saving the organization money, right? All you got to do is turn around and show that revenue gain, right?
Right.
Getting the time and the effort to merge and redeploy the right solution, right? Or maybe, taking the time to take that functionality out of tool 2 and tool 3 and putting it into tool 1, that sometimes is the tougher sell, right? Of that, I'm not going to have bodies maybe to work on initiatives 2 and 3 for you from a business perspective because I've got to get this done, right? And I think it's about balancing priorities too, right? There's just too many hot priorities a lot of times, right?
Mm-hmm.
So finding the way to put those up there enough that they get enough attention that we're still moving along while addressing what the business needs to.
And part of this that's so important is being able to communicate properly. And now this comes around full circle to what we were talking about in the beginning about what makes a good virtual CISO. And I'll say what makes a good CISO, because remember, first of all, the way that this whole virtual CISO industry started is that it was prior CISOs that were then now offering their services fractional, because they came to realize it's like SMBs don't have that sort of capability. But then you get the people who put the moniker, the title on their LinkedIn and all that, but
Right.
they don't have the experience of being able to talk and communicate with the C-suite and board members, because they were never at that position anywhere in their organization. And that's one of the reasons why I used to be very hardline about this. I'm like, you cannot be a virtual CISO if you were never a CISO before, because you don't understand. I've backed off a little bit from that, because I've met people that are practitioners in the field that are excellent with risk management. They get it. They've learned that skill at some other way along the way. But you can't be a virtual CISO or a CISO without having that skill set. I mean, nobody has been a CISO forever either, so you have to start somewhere. I get that.
Yep, you do. And what I find, there's different types of CISOs in my mind, right? Mm-hmm. So your small organizations, if I were starting out in the field right now today, I'd be looking for those small organizations that my leadership, the business leadership, is going to be more tactical and business standpoints, right? Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be going after the large organization that has a board, a very significant, high-end banking board and things like that, right? I'd be looking for those smaller niche type organizations to cut my teeth as a CISO, right? Because they're going to be more forgiving, right? And they're going to help you learn that whole idea of talking to them in their business terms. Right. I reported to CFOs, and they probably were some of the best leaders I had to prepare for, right? Mm-hmm. Talking the money, right? Talking risk. CFOs understand risk and money more than a lot of CEOs do, to be honest with you, right?
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if the organization doesn't have a CRO, a chief risk officer, then the CFO Correct. Is the best one to report to.
Absolutely. Right. But even better than IT. I find with IT, and I've reported to a lot of CIOs, and then there's not necessarily a problem with that, but that leader has the same challenge of talking mm-hmm. to the business and getting time with the business and being seen as, an innovator and a supporter, and not just back office functions. Through a lot of my career, the whole IT department has been seen as back office, right? That they're not enablers and not business savvy. Right.
You don't know about IT unless something breaks.
And they don't factor it in. Right. And that has really shifted over the years. But I think in smaller organizations, you have that ability to have those conversations directly with the presidents and the CEOs and the CFOs and things like that, because you're generally a one person shop, right? Trying to do all of those things, and you're reporting directly to them. It helps build that. So if that were me, but I'm kind of with you on this whole vCISO, haven't been in the field kind of thing. I have mixed feelings about it. I also am tired of hearing that we have a talent shortage. No, we don't.
No.
We have a unicorn shortage, right? Everybody wants the unicorn. And I'm sorry, but not everybody can be a unicorn.
No. I mean, you can be a CISO for like 30 years and you will have shortcomings in some areas. I mean,
absolutely. So be willing to work with somebody in those short areas, this whole boxed in too. You can't get into finance unless you've been in finance. That drives me nuts.
Right.
I understand they're more regulated, but in some ways that makes my job a whole lot easier. So why can I not get into the banking industry? Right.
Yeah. I mean, I tell folks I mean, really, security is security is security. It's just that sometimes the acronyms change. I mean, exactly. you do the same thing across every sort of industry. You're going to get like 90% there right out the bat. I mean, Then it's just a matter of like looking at like maybe some things around like with the the NCUA, a 72-hour reporting period. Maybe that's not the same as something else, and so on. Okay,
those
so
are all learnable things, though.
Yeah,
we didn't know
it's
HIPAA when we first started with HIPAA either, but we figured it out, right?
we didn't have regulations when we were doing security.
We didn't, no, and so they all came along, and so we've been subjected all these years through all of that. I seen one the other day. It was for a fractional vCISO, and they specifically wanted you to have startup experience in a startup company. Okay, I understand the reason why. Things move fast. They're a little chaotic. They want to make sure that you're going to be able to work in that kind of environment. Well, just because I haven't done that before doesn't mean that I can't work in that kind of environment. I've seen that a lot with lots of other established businesses, right? You have change in business. You have things go on. Things get chaotic. And a lot of businesses aren't that structured. And many of us work just fine in that, right?
Every mile starts with the first step.
Unicorn.
Yeah, every mile starts with the first step. It doesn't mean I don't know how to walk. I mean, it's like I can figure it out. I can navigate through. And I'm going to use that as a segue as I look at your background there, because you talked briefly about starting Cyber Risk Navigator, but I love talking with folks that then go down the same path, the entrepreneurial path. And I love to ask, what was one of the more difficult things that you have found by going down that path that you maybe didn't anticipate?
I think I anticipated, but it's worse than I thought it would be. Sales and marketing.
Four-letter words, both of them.
I have a dislike for sales and marketing, and I completely underestimated the amount of effort and time it was going to take out of me to do those things, right?
It's like 80% easily,
It is, and it's and it's not enjoyable to me. I want to be doing cyber stuff, right? Mm-hmm. I want to be leading organizations and making an impact over there. So that's the toughest part for me, I think. And I'm really focused on trying to keep my business light, right? Kind of more of a boutique solopreneur kind of thing, right? I don't have huge growth, aspirations where I want to hire a bunch of staff. I want to keep my costs low, and I want to focus on the organizations that value somebody like me, who is going to give them 100%, even if I am fractional, and I'm going to be ingrained in their organization and work with them to build their cybersecurity maturity, right? So it's just really different.
Yeah, and that is the selling point right there, because I have found, and I'm not saying this just because that's where I was as well too, but I have found that the best service comes from the very small organizations. I like to say sometimes, you're a big fish in a small pond. You'll get that, but conversely, you have to ensure, getting back, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but small organization, dedicated person or a couple people, make sure that they have the stuff behind them in their career, and that they're not using you, the organization, as a training field. I think that's the most important thing, because I don't know about you, but I and then later we have come upon organizations that have had what I call vCISOs in name only. And they've done more harm to the overall security program tracking than good.
Yeah. I've seen it myself. I follow a couple of those, particularly when I worked in the consulting space. So your MSPs trying to become MSSPs, right? Mm-hmm. And just throwing that vCISO out there to add on to their consulting business, right? That can be a challenge, right? Yeah. And I think it's a little bit of a conflict of interest. It can be done well if your CISO services are at the right level of the organization, right? Meaning they can strongly influence to make sure that those things are getting delivered to the client in a timely manner, right?
Yeah, I always have to, I'm chuckling because I got to pull myself back. Otherwise I'm going to go down another 20-minute rabbit hole, but just suffice to say, it's like conflict of interest with MSSPs is huge. It can be managed. One way to definitively manage it, and this is sort of draconian, is that if you're an MSSP that has a virtual CISO, the virtual CISO cannot recommend services that your MSSP, but that'll never happen, because the main reason for having the virtual CISO is as an in-state salesperson. So, okay, don't make it a requirement that they have to purchase your services. Be transparent about it and say, we can offer this to you, but
Right.
you can do it elsewhere. But all
But
of
here's
this,
other options, right? And
yeah,
I'll tell you, that did get me in trouble, right? Because I was always the one looking for the right size solution for the client. And
mhm,
okay, yes, we have this, and it's great, and and it might cost you this, and it includes these things. If that's not a go for you, here's some other options to look at, right? And I would go to the next level and help them look at those, even though it maybe wasn't in the best interest of the overall MSP, which is why I wanted to be independent. I wanted to make sure that I would have full autonomy to be able to do what's right for the client.
right.
Right.
But this can all be, it can be stressful. It can be stressful being an entrepreneur. It can be stressful being in our field. I encourage folks that they need to do something that is healthy, or at least do something that is not unhealthy, to decompress from the stresses. What do you do to decompress from the stress, not only of information security, but also of being an entrepreneur?
Right. So for me, it's anything in nature, right? So
Mm.
if it's piddling in my flower beds, I love flowers. I have pretty extensive flower beds here. Sometimes it feels like another job, but I enjoy them. I also live on a lake, so spending time out on the lake and decompressing. We also love to camp. Basically, anything that is non-connected, right? In nature, quiet, less chaos, gives me time to refuel and just kind of chill.
Yeah, I just had this random thought. I'm like, I've done almost 250 of these discussions, and I would love to collate the responses to that question over time and do analysis on it. And first, I'm thinking, well, I can go through every one. I don't even have transcripts for all these. I started doing that about a year ago. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait just a little bit longer. And once AI gets to the point, it's just like I'll point them to like a share where I have all the videos. I'm like, look at all these videos and do it for me.
That would be cool. And
I
then do the
don't.
highlights of what all CISOs do,
Yeah,
and see if
we
there's any common.
can't do it yet, but I'm guessing like 2 years from now,
You
they'll
will.
be powerful enough that I can do that.
Yeah.
Well, finally, future plans. What do you have on the horizon, either for yourself or for Cyber Risk Navigator, or both?
Yeah. So really, I'm really looking to build the right size program for that smaller cloud connected organization, right? I think that's underserved, overserved in some cases, right? If they have requirements from a regulatory standpoint to do X, Y, and Z, they're probably overpaying for those services. For me, I want to find that right niche and that right size approach for them that keeps them nimble and light. So that's kind of where I'm focusing.
Awesome. Well, hey, Becky, it's been a great conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time out to be with us today.
Great. Thanks, Greg. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, everybody, stay secure.